Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining today's session where we're going to talk about the C4 Disc Toolkit for Disability Equity in Scholarly Communication. My name's Simon Holt, and I work for Elsevier. I'm based in Oxford in the UK, and I identify as a blind person. Today, I'm really glad to be joined by my co-panelists and friends, Elizabeth, Erin, and Karen. Each of them will introduce themselves a little bit later on. I'm going to start out just by talking a little bit about why we've put the toolkit together, what we're going to try and achieve, and most importantly, how you can get involved. I'm then going to hand over to Elizabeth, who's going to talk about what's in the toolkit itself, before Erin is going to talk about our future plans. Please could we move to the next slide? So who are we? I think it's probably best if I start by saying who we are not. We are not lawyers, right? So if you have questions, and I hope you have lots of questions at the end of this, there'll certainly be time for questions. But if you have questions about the law and what the law says, we are not the right people to answer those questions. We are a group of volunteers who all work in scholarly communications, either in the publishing sector, in the university library sector, or in the academic sector. And we represent a group of about 35 volunteers overall, who are all from different countries around the world. And really, we are a combination of people with lived experience of disability or who otherwise are interested in disability in some way. And what we've done here is to put together a resource that's really aimed at people with disabilities, managers of people with disabilities, colleagues of people with disabilities. Because when you think about it, if the United Nations says that around 15% of the world's working population have some form of disability, whether that's a physical, a neurological, or a sensory disability, then actually what that means is that if you yourself don't have a disability, you certainly know lots of people who do. And so for us, it was quite important to start a conversation around disability within our industry in order to normalize the discussion. Next slide, please. So what are we trying to achieve here, right? So in terms of our mission and goals, it really is around trying to normalize conversations around disability. I think, I often think the biggest hurdle to disability inclusion is people feeling too afraid to ask questions and say what they don't know because they're so worried about saying the wrong thing. So what we really want to do is to provide a resource hub that will answer common questions, but also more importantly, start a community. I remember when I started working in publishing, and for years afterwards, I felt like I was the only person with a disability in, not only my organization, but in the whole of the publishing industry. And actually, since I started being a bit more of an activist, I suppose, I found there's lots of other people in the industry. So what we wanted to create was not just a hub for a conversation, but a hub where people can come and find belonging and really find a community that they belong to. I think this is especially important when you work for maybe a smaller organization who may not have staff networks and that kind of thing. We also, as I said, we're not lawyers, so we're never going to be the truth, whatever the truth is, but we want to tell people's personal stories. We want to provide some practical guidance, and we want to give people just a little bit of information to think about and links to resources that we found useful at every stage of the employee life cycle. Next slide, please. So why did we decide a toolkit was, the best idea? Well, as I said, it was quite important to create a hub, I think. And obviously, if you see the statistics on this slide, you will see, as I mentioned before, just a large amount of people who have a disability in the workforce. And so therefore, what we wanted to do was, instead of having lots of webinars or just kind of blog posts, etc., that are really important in themselves and can be really impactful, but may not last, or you can't really iterate or evolve them. We wanted to create a resource that could evolve over time, and that different people could get involved and tell their own stories, as they arise. So therefore, what we'd find here is a hub of information, but also a platform for people to tell their stories, ask their questions, and really get involved in a conversation. I'm now going to hand over to Elizabeth, who's going to talk about what is in the Disability Toolkit for Equity.
Thank you, Simon. My name is Elizabeth Moyer. I'm with Los Alamos National Laboratory Research Library as a librarian. And what the Toolkit for Disability Equity is for? It has a practical tools for use. It is dynamic, up-to-date information and multiple entry points for users. It is targeted towards scholar communication specific needs relevant to people working in the scholar communication field. The audience is both potential and current employees with disabilities, employers, organizations, and allies. Next slide, please. This 1-minute video serves as an introduction to the effort and the need for a toolkit.
Welcome to the Scholarly Communications Disability Equity Toolkit. 1 in 7 people have a disability. So if it's not you, it's someone you work with. Our toolkit is for everyone involved in scholarly communications. It'll help you be more informed and more disability inclusive. To bring us all together to share and to learn. Because no question is too small or too basic. If you're asking it, someone else is thinking it.
Next slide, please. So the toolkit, where are we now? What has been accomplished so far in the toolkit? We have a welcome, which includes the introduction to the effort, as well as the welcome video that you just saw. We have a common questions area, which includes FAQs based on questions pertinent to disability use cases, case study examples, and links to further reading. There is also a resources section, which has curated links to reliable sources of information for further reading. And that's what we've been doing so far for Toolkit, where we are now. Next, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Erin, who will talk about the toolkit in a little bit more detail.
Thank you. So here you can see a couple of sample pages from the toolkit. And here we decided to host the toolkit on PubPub, in part because it currently hosts a number of other C4Disc toolkits. So it's a great resource for a lot of information that is related to diversity, equity, and inclusion already. It's also an accessible and flexible platform. It's easier for us to update over time, and it's also interactive, so readers can leave comments and join in on the conversation. Each individual page has a DOI, and there are multiple routes into the same information, so topics can be linked and grouped in multiple ways. So you can see one of the common question pages here, which is about, I have a newly diagnosed disability, what do I do next? And so these pages include case studies, information that is specific to scholarly publishing, but also vetted links to further information so that people can read additional resources that they know are trustworthy and relevant to their situation. In the resources and further reading section, we have suggestions from our research, writing, and steering committees for their favorite books. You can see here websites and podcasts as well related to disability equity. We also have sections on various style guides that are available, accessibility standards, and a whole host of information about disability and the workplace. Next slide, please. And there's a lot more to come. So you can see here, we'll be launching a community forum in 2024. You can see the question mark here is really just to reflect the fact that we're still deciding on an appropriate, accessible forum platform that can be moderated as well. So it's a safe space for people who join. And the employee lifecycle section will include additional subsections that are specific to different job profiles within publishing. So for example, editorial, marketing, production, etc., as well as different stages of the employment lifecycle. So recruiting and hiring, onboarding, work life, all of those sorts of topics. We'll also be expanding the common questions section. So it currently covers disabled employees. We're hoping to expand that to include information specific to managers, organizations, colleagues and allies, etc. And then finally, you'll see up in the corner, we're also looking at the long-term management and governance of the toolkit. It's really important to us that this is a live resource that is constantly updated. And of course, that needs people to manage that process. And so that's an important part of the work that we're doing now. And we're looking forward to having a new governance and steering committee in 2024. Next slide, please. And so that's it from us for now, but we'll be hosting a live Q&A for the toolkit at 11:30 Eastern on Tuesday, the 28th of November. Thank you so much for your time. And we have been Simon Holtz, Elizabeth Moyer, Erin Osborne-Martin, and Karen Stoll-Farrell. Thanks again.